Now then, results for Ireland have not gone Stephen Kenny's way, and it seems like Irish football is at its lowest ebb. The development of football players is slowing down, and our league is still a mess. But how do we get out of this? One way might be to look at other places and see what they're doing, and one of those places is Iceland. In 2010, Iceland were ranked 112th in the FIFA World Rankings. Today, they are ranked 46th. That is despite only having a population in the country of less than 400,000. So how did they do it? I am joined on the line by Dadi Rafnsson, Head of Football Development at HK. Dadi, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
So, as I said, Irish football is in a bit of a mess at the minute, and we don't really know how to get out of it. In terms of Iceland, can we just get a little bit of background on the football structure in the country? What are the leagues like? Are the leagues fully professional? How many leagues are there, and who are the best teams?
Yeah, so there's the league system in Iceland is that there's 3 leagues of 12 teams, 12 to 10 teams. And then there's a 4th league that is sort of, like you could have teams that are quite serious and some not so serious at the bottom league. So there's a league structure, and if you want to have a place to play in Iceland, there's plenty of teams to do it in, and every town and township has a team. But the top league is 12 teams at the moment, and they play a double round, and they're now thinking about adding a 3rd round. Obviously, because of the weather and the winter, and then our season is quite short. Now they're trying actually to make it longer by playing more on artificial pitches indoors, and also just try to stretch the schedule any way you can. But normally the season goes from the end of April until like middle or beginning of October. And I think the only way to get it longer would be for all the teams to have artificial turf, which at the moment maybe 60-70% of the teams do have.
Okay. And in terms of those 12 teams in the top tier, are they all fully professional, or are there some semi-pro teams as well?
So by definition, Iceland is an amateur league, yet if you're in the top league at least, and also in the 2nd league, then you would be getting a salary, and there are professional players in the league, fully professional, but there's also people who are combining football with their studies or with another job. But it's getting more and more demands on it being professional, and so there's a big push on the clubs to go fully professional, and it's getting their baby steps, but obviously the economics of it are quite difficult, because running a fully professional club is a big task. You need a lot of investment, and the club structure here is quite unusual, because in most other countries I at least know of, there's an owner. If not actually a business or a single owner, then there's a some sort of ownership structure. But in Iceland, there's no clear maybe owner of the clubs, because the clubs are all their heritage is community based. So even the top league, there's no single owner. You couldn't get a Roman Abramovich into Iceland.
Okay.
The structure doesn't allow for it. So actually the clubs are owned by the community. I can go to my local clubs. I can basically go to almost any club and participate in their annual meeting, and have a vote on who's on the board. And normally on the board, and it's volunteers, it's people from the community. But the operational side, they're fully professionals. The coaches are professional. Many of the players are professional and semi-professional. It's getting there slightly.
And in terms of exporting players, so Ireland obviously is much closer geographically to England, so naturally in the past it has been Irish players that went over, but now of course everybody can travel and play in these countries, so it's becoming more and more difficult for the Irish players to in the past, we would be exporting them to Manchester United, to Chelsea, to the top teams. And now it is the lower ebb Premier League sides and Championship sides. In terms of exporting Icelandic players, is it seen as a positive or a negative? Is it something that you would like to see the players go to these top leagues, or is the country trying to encourage them to stay in the league and stay in the country?
So there are some people who want to keep them for a bit longer, because you could say that, you know, there's a few different ways to go professional in Europe. It's quite common for 16-year-old boys, 17-year-old boys to get contracts with academy teams in Europe, and quite a lot of them actually do. And another route for players to go pro is to actually get into the first team, have 2-3 good seasons, and then you're transferred abroad. And the third, and probably not so common way, is to have a late development around the age of 24 to 27, do good and get a chance. So these are like the three maybe pathways that you could see. Some people want to keep the guys longer than for them to leave at 16 or 17. I don't think there's any magic formula to it. We need to have all of these three different pipelines to go. And for example, in our current national team, the one that's, you know, coming to the end of their careers, the best players all went when they were 16, 17. Aron Gunnarsson, he went to Holland, 16 years old. Gylfi Sigurðsson went to Reading. Kolbeinn Sigþórsson, he went to Holland. So they were all quite young when they went abroad. All of our best marquee players. Maybe the one exception would be Finn Bogason, who plays in Germany, has played in Spain, Greece, been the top scorer in Holland. He was 20, 21 when he left, so he was a late developer. I think you need to have all these different channels to get to the professional game. I myself, I think our best players would have to leave at the age of 16, 17.
Okay. In terms of the national team, and I do want to talk about the coaching structures that Iceland have in place, what was the lowest point in Iceland football? And was there a sliding doors moment that you can point to as this is the point where we decided to turn it around and think about developing it in a national way, or in a way that has developed it to what it is now?
Good question. So there's two things you need to consider. I think people should be wary of equating the success of the national team with all of the whole football structure, because the football structure, when we're talking about the youth teams and the league, that might be doing well, but the national team for some reason or other is not doing well. So there was for the national team, there was quite a low moment. Probably, I can't remember exactly the year, but this is around the late 2000s, 2007 to 2009, 10. We're losing to countries like Liechtenstein and Cyprus, and countries that were normally not losing to. And there was what was happening was probably the same thing that's happening now, is that the old guard that had been playing for quite a long time, they were nearing the end. And the brilliant thing that the FA did was they took in Lars Lagerbäck at the moment when we had players like Gylfi Sigurðsson, Aron Gunnarsson, Kolbeinn Sigþórsson, when they were all about the age of 22, 22. And so getting in Lars, who comes from Sweden, had a good success with the national teams. He what everybody here says, that he brought structure, and he brought a professional attitude to the national team. So his guidance, his experience, this allowed the young guys to, he actually didn't win, I think, his first 6 or 7 games. He lost most of those games.
Okay.
But they were able to give these young guys like 20 national team games before they actually started to perform. And I think that's also important, is that, they need to have 20 national team games before you can actually start to demand results from these guys.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a lucky moment, and Iceland qualified for the finals of the Euros of for the U21 Euros with these players in 2011, and they had this dilemma: should we take these players with the national team, full national team, or should we let them play in the finals for the U21s? And they actually took them to the finals instead of playing for the A national team. So they got major finals experience in Denmark back in 2011. And but it could have gone a different way, because I don't know if you know this, but the other guy that was in contention for being hired, apart from Lars Lagerbäck, that was Roy Keane.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so that was actually the big news back then. It was that, the FA was, that Roy Keane was number one on the wish list for the chairman of the FA. And you can imagine, how small things matter, how small different things matter, because would Iceland have gone the same way with Roy Keane? I don't think so, but we can't be too sure.
Yeah, I would have been surprised if they did, to be honest. What's very interesting there is that there is a lot of similarities in what is happening with Ireland at the minute, because Stephen Kenny came in and he's trying to change the structure of Irish football in terms of the style and the way that they play. He also managed the under-21s who were playing in a major tournament, and now in the World Cup qualifiers, there are players who are getting their chance at a young age with very few caps. And again, he also has not won a game in 10 games in his first 10 games in charge. And there's a lot of pressure on him at the minute. Yeah. But it does take a long time to develop these type of things. And I do think it's interesting that Iceland went through something similar. In terms of the path to the national team and path to professional football in Iceland, underage structure, what is it like in Iceland? Are they connected to, are the smaller clubs connected to the bigger clubs, or how does it work?
So it's actually a very different structure to any place else. Obviously we're a small country, only 350,000 people who live here. But every neighborhood, every small town, they have their own local club, and they all have sports for kids, mainly football, basketball, handball, gymnastics. So Iceland is a sporting nation. It's something that we do. So because the clubs are community clubs, I can take my kids to the local club, or any club, be it, at the age of 3, and they can start to, come there once or twice a week. It's a great thing for socializing, young kids, because they get to be a part of the community, put on a shirt, run around, with or without a ball. When they're 6 years old, they get into the system, so to speak, and they can stay. Everybody can stay until they're 19. There's no selection. We don't select players, but we do have different tiers of teams. So, for example, the club that I work for, HK, and the former club I used to work for, Breiðablik, both of them have about 1,000 players, 1,000 to 1,500 players in all age groups. So if you're a U12 player, for example, then and you're part of a 1,000 person club, then in your age group you might have 100 players.
Okay.
They all have a team, but their team compete in different ability structures. And I think one of the best things about our system also is that you can then move up and down between those teams. So if you're doing well in the B team, then you can move up to the A team the next week, and vice versa. So that's good flexibility in the structure. We train 11 months of the year, basically, because we have the artificial pitches, we have the infrastructure. This is the other key moment, because you were asking about what happened, because you have to separate the national team and you have to separate the structure. In around 95 to 2000, we have two major things happening, or actually 3. One was that the local communities, they all started to fund infrastructure. So, artificial turfs, indoor pitches. Every school has a small artificial turf next to it. so kids can have great accessibility to football, to the facilities. When I was a kid, I'm 45. When I was a kid, we had to shovel the gravel fields in the winter to play. Sounds like I'm ancient, but it's not longer than that.
Yeah.
But what they also did was that the local communities started to offer vouchers. So every kid who goes to sport, the local community will pay 2 vouchers to the tone of like 300 euros towards their football or their handball, their basketball, the music, those the Boy Scouts, whatever you want to do in your free time. So the taxpayers' money is actually funding the young kids in sport. The third thing that happened was that the FA started to place a lot of emphasis on coach education, and they made it really accessible. So, not many people had UFAs or Bs at the start of the century, but, I did my B in 2005, my A in 2009, and I think we have about 300 or 400 UFA coaches now at the moment in the country. And we have about probably around 1,000 people who have done the UEFA B.
Okay. And I read somewhere, I'm not sure, you can correct me if it's wrong, from under 10s up, you're coached by a UEFA B licensed coach. Is that correct?
Well, almost every kid, be it 3-year-old or 19-year-old, they're coached by a UEFA B or UEFA coach. Okay. And a lot of, like, my kid 3-year-old goes to training, and the coach has a UFA. And so there's also a lot of flexibility for the coaches within the system. Coaches can coach, we have very good coaches who have maybe coached U16, U19 teams, even in the, Premier League for men's or women's. And they might all of a sudden be coaching kids, 6-year-olds or 10-year-olds, or they might be coaching, women at the other, the next year. So there's a lot of flexibility in the system for coaches to get different kind of jobs, but it also means that just all of the kids do have a qualified coach.
That's very interesting, because obviously it does come with the caveat that, Ireland has 5 million people versus 350,000 people in Iceland, but in the Champions League, so Dundalk qualified for the champions of League of Ireland, qualified for the Europa League, and their coach couldn't be on the sideline because he didn't have a UEFA A license. And that happened years previously as well. And that's the top tier of Irish football, which is supposed to be the professional league of the country.
I think, of course, the badges don't, they don't say everything, but they actually mean that you've gone through, here in Iceland, you've gone through 7 levels of education where you had to both listen and learn and, be exposed to different ideas, discussions with your peers and with people who are experienced. And I think that's a good way. We don't have a system, if I should say, no like central system that we adhere to. If you want to be a coach, you can sort of develop as your own coach. We don't want to tell you have to do everything this way or that way. There's some things that we want you to do, like show up on time and plan your session. We want to be able to, you have to be able to explain to us why you chose that session, what you're trying to do with your training and your coaching. But if you want to play like Barcelona, then do that way. Or if you want to play like, not Barcelona, then, go that way. It's quite flexible. We don't have that kind of a system that some countries maybe think they do.
And just a couple more questions before we finish up. You mentioned the system that the players go into until they're 19. Would the national team have coaches and staff watching all of those people in that system to see potential who might come through to the national side, or what is the what's the outcome of that system? What are they aiming for?
So I think I saw somewhere just this on Twitter, but develop players and national teams select players. I think we have a very good communication here between coaches, between teams, because it's a small country with the distances aren't long for most of us. So if you see a player, then if there's a player coming up, then we know about him quite early, him or her. And also because we allow kids to stay in the system, but we also get a lot of late developers that we could all lose if we were doing selection. And but the national team, they start to look at players around the age of 15. They bring them into, and they bring in a lot of kids. They don't bring in a few; they bring in a lot of kids for camps and like just to look at them. But the coaches are also the U17 coaches, the U18 coaches. They're out there also looking at games. That's their job.
Yeah. Before we finish up, then, the surge in Icelandic football. Obviously, there's quite a lot happening, but how much do you think is down to the sort of golden era of having the likes of Gylfi Sigurdsson, who is clearly a world-class footballer at any level, part of your national team, as opposed to a structure put in place at one point in time and it leading to these players?
Yeah, I myself, I'm not a big believer in that. I think you need people working on, some sort of structure. But if you sit down and plan, we're going to be in the World Cup in 10 years' time. I don't think that's a good way to go about it. You have to, instead, what happened here is that, the fundamentals are strong. Fundamentals meaning player development. Players have clubs to play in, teams to play in, coaches to offer, expert opinion and training. You also have a lot of room for free play. Of course, you're going to have players from this. Yes, we did have a golden generation, but again, what if they had been coached by me instead of Lars Lagerbäck? Then, maybe they wouldn't have gone to Euros and they wouldn't have gone to the World Cup. So a lot of happy things coming together, not just, single plan or anything like that, but anywhere you go in the world, I think if you find that the fundamentals of grassroots and availability for players to shine, then you're going to have a strong football core and football nation. We have been thinking about this question for 4 years. We thought 2016 was the top. Then 2018 came with the World Cup. That was another top. I think maybe this team now, they could have started with they were victims of their own success, because if there wasn't the Nations League and Iceland being in Group A, if that hadn't happened, then they would have probably maybe done some rotation on some of the old guard earlier. But we do have players like Isak Johannesson, who plays in Sweden, who is coveted by most clubs in Europe. We have also an 18-year-old playing in Serie A. We have quite a few, excellent kid now playing at Ajax Young, only 17 years old. So there's more players coming through. So this is why I want to separate the national team from the system. The system is still delivering, but now, it's just a question of how the FA will, how they will use the ingredients that are being brought to the table. How are they going to prepare the next meal?
Yeah. It seems like that is what's missing with Ireland at the minute, is definitely the fundamentals and the background of building it from the ground up seems to be the issue. Before we finish up then, Dadi, new Volcano in Iceland. How is it reacted? We didn't get the same reaction to it as the previous one that left a smoke cloud over Europe for a couple of weeks. How has it gone down?
So it's we call it a tourist volcano. So it's nobody's flying anyway. So it's not disturbing any flights at all. But it's quite a beautiful one, small one, and close to the city. So of course everybody's running over to the volcano to get a selfie, And if you know any Icelanders on any social media, then you will have had enough by the volcano by the end of the week. But it's actually quite nice. We just had a new baby boy, so I haven't been up there yet. So, but as soon as I have the chance, we're gonna go. But we're not gonna bring the bacon and eggs like some people have been doing.
How very Icelandic of them, just treating a volcano as a selfie meaning. Anyway, Dadi, it's been absolutely brilliant chatting with you. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for calling.